Hi, Marie here from Pottery Crafters. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a butter dish. From making the dish to the lid, trimming, adding a handle, and glazing with a few tips in between. All the supplies used in this video are listed for you below in the show notes. Let's make a butter dish. It's always best to wedge your clay and get rid of any air bubbles and even out the consistency. I'll start out with 1 pound of Amico Amix Stoneware White clay for the butter dish. Wet the wheel with a damp sponge and throw the clay on the wheel. Bracing my left hand on the side while the side of my right palm presses down on the top, and press the wobble out, keeping my elbows anchored to my thighs. Cone up the clay, then press the clay back down. With the wheel speed at medium-high to high, I find I have better control over the clay on the higher speed. When I feel the clay is centered, instead of opening the clay, I continue to press straight down and set the base for the butter dish. Slowly release my hands from the clay disc and measure it. I want to make sure that it's large enough for the butter. 5.5 inches is good. I want the butter dish to be 5 inches across, and the clay will shrink in the kiln. Push the clay out a little more to the rim with my fist. With my sponge, fingers, and thumb, I push the rest of the clay to the rim, holding my thumb in the center to prevent the clay from forming a lump in the middle. As you push the clay out, it likes to come back to the center. Careful not to take too much clay away from the inside of the dish, because I won't have enough clay left to trim and create a foot. And I don't need to make the rim that high, so I don't need too much clay. Then pinch gently. I begin shaping the rim of the butter dish, with my inside fingers guiding and the outside fingers supporting to create a defined lip. With the wheel on medium speed, continue to smooth out the clay with your fingers. You want the clay flat. You don't want any lumps to form in the middle of the dish. This motion automatically compresses the clay and aligns the particles, helping to avoid cracks. I'm using a smoothing sponge to smooth the inside of the dish and remove any marks or slip. Nice, clean, compressed floor and defined lip on the rim. I'll use the ultimate edger to make a nice edge on the outside of the dish. Once the base is finished, use the calipers or a ruler to measure the inside of the dish, for the lid to fit snugly on the dish. Make sure it's not too snug because you need room to apply the glaze. Set the dish aside and make the lid. For the lid, I have 1.5 pounds of Amico Amix Stoneware White clay. Bracing my left hand on the side while the side of my right palm presses down on the top, the wheel at medium-fast speed, and press the wobble out. Making sure to keep the elbows anchored to my thighs, cone up the clay, then press the clay back down with the wheel at medium-high or high speed. Once the clay is centered, continue to press down until it's around 5 inches across, remembering to leave enough room on the lid for the glaze. You can hit the like button anytime during this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever a new video comes out. Stop the wheel to measure with the calipers to ensure that it's the proper width before you open the clay. Then open the clay. I wet my sponge and tuck it in between my palm and thumb. This way, if the clay starts to drag or stick, I can squeeze a little water on the clay without having to remove my hand from the clay. Compress the bottom with a sponge. Also take into account that you will leave some clay behind when you remove it from the wheel or the bat. In this case, the bat. Now bring the walls of the cylinder up. I want to bring the walls straight up so the lid doesn't hit the butter. And make sure there's enough height so the butter doesn't hit the inside of the lid on the top. Once the height and the width are right, I'll compress the rim. Remove any extra clay from the base of the lid, or should I say the top of the lid, with my pointy modeling tool. I'm going to do one more pull to get a bit more height. Now I'm happy with the shape, and the size is a perfect fit for the butter dish. Let both pieces dry until they're a soft leather hard. Once the dish and the lid are at a soft leather hard stage, I can take them off the wheel with the wire cutter. If you have trouble removing your clay from the wheel, I have a good step-by-step video on removing pottery from the wheel. I left the link for you below in the show notes. Once the dish and lid have reached a nice leather hard stage, it's time to trim them. I have the butter dish upside down on the Grip Mini with the trim tool on its edge. Start in the middle and spiral my way out to the outer edge. With the wheel at a slow to medium speed, stopping a ½ inch from the edge. Tap the center. You'll hear the difference in the thickness of the clay as you trim. Take another run through with the trim tool on its edge. Holding the trim tool steady, define the inside around the foot. I remove a bit of clay at a time from the bottom. Hold the trim tool with both hands. Trimming is fun to do when the clay is just right. If it's too moist, it'll be sticky. Too dry, and the clay will be chippy and really hard to trim. I'm going to leave the spiral pattern on the bottom. I love the look. You can leave it smooth if you choose to. Tap the bottom one more time. Great, just the right thickness. Sign the bottom and set it aside to dry. Take the little sliders off and replace them with the 1½ inch tall sliders. Using the flat part of the trim tool, I'll round off the lid. I don't want to take too much clay off. Stop to tap the center. This Grip Mini works great. It's my go-to trimming tool when I'm working with smaller pieces. If you're interested, I have a full review on both the Grip and the Grip Mini, so you can decide which one works the best for you. Maybe both. To finish off the lid, run a damp sponge over the trimmed areas to soften the edges. Now for the handle of the lid. To add the handle to the lid, I'm using my handheld clay extruder, pressing out a nice shape with one of the dies. Cut a short length off and shape it into a simple curved handle that feels good in your hand. Then place some slip on a dish. I have a video on making and storing your slip. Mine has lasted for years. I score the handle, then the lid. Then apply the slip to the top of the lid and the bottom ends of the handle. Press it into place and blend the handle so it's nice and secure. Smooth the handle on the lid with the smooth modeling tool. Once they're bone dry, it's time for the bisque firing. I'm placing the butter dish and lid together in the kiln and bisque fire to cone 04. Now it's time to glaze them. First, wipe them down with a clean damp sponge to remove any ceramic dust that may interfere with the glaze. Before you glaze, make sure your hands are clean and dry, or wear gloves. Then apply wax resist to the bottom of the foot and the rim of the lid, so the pieces don't stick to the kiln shelf during the glaze firing, or in my case, stick to the cookie in the kiln. Once the wax is dry, we're ready to glaze. I always mix my glaze well and make sure there are no clumps in the glaze and the consistency of the glaze is even. It's always good to run the glaze through a strainer because these little clumps may end up on my brush. I'm starting with Amaco Honey Flux. Apply one coat on the bottom and the sides of the dish using my favorite fan brush. It really helps the glaze go on smoothly. Let this dry, then apply a second coat. I don't want to apply it too thick because I'll be applying a little more glaze and I don't want it to run too much. Set this aside and let it dry. Then apply an even coat of honey flux to the outside of the lid and handle. Honey flux is great for layering and really helps other glazes to flow. Let this dry. Then apply a second coat to the outside of the lid and handle. I use honey flux a lot. It goes well with so many other glazes. Did you know the honey flux is available by the gallon now? Set this aside and let it dry. Now glaze the inside of the butter dish. Nice even coat. Let it dry. And apply one more coat and set it aside to dry. Now I'm switching to Amico Arctic Blue. Layering the Arctic Blue over the honey flux on the handle and outside of the lid only. Let this dry and apply one more on the handle and top only, keeping my brush strokes nice and even. I'm thinking about where I want the colors to overlap and where I want them to break over the edges. Let this dry. Apply only one coat of Arctic Blue on the inside of the dish. I don't want the glaze to get too thick because the lid may not fit on the dish. As I had mentioned earlier, this is something to keep in mind when layering glazes. Make sure you leave enough room so the lid fits after glazing. Let this dry and apply one more coat of Arctic Blue on the side of the dish. Let this dry. Now for the inside of the lid. I'm pouring the Arctic Blue in the lid for a nice smooth finish. Flip it upside down in the bowl and let the excess glaze flow down onto the lid. Then set it aside for a few minutes. Now I'm going to apply Amico Textured Turquoise to the inside and sides of the dish. This glaze adds a nice look, and it plays really well with the Arctic Blue and honey flux underneath. That's it for the dish. No more glaze. As I said earlier, you don't want the glaze too thick. Wipe the rim of the lid so I can set it in the kiln without fusing to my cookie. Now apply the textured turquoise around the handle and top of the lid only. Nice and thick. If you're new to brush glazing, I have a video on 21 brush glazing tips. I left the link for you below in the show notes. Let this dry. Apply one last coat of textured turquoise on the handle and top only. I want the textured turquoise to flow down the lid with the help of the honey flux and Arctic Blue. I'm excited to see how it turns out. Did I add too much glaze? Not enough? Or just the right amount? Oops, too much dripped. I want the glaze to flow down evenly. That drip may flow too much. Just wipe it off gently with the damp sponge. There. Make sure the glaze is completely dry and wipe any glaze off the bottom of the dish so nothing sticks to the shelf. Load them in the kiln and fire to cone 5 with a 20-minute hold. Let's see how it turned out. The dish turned out perfect. Just the way I wanted it. And the perfect size. The 2 coats of honey flux turned out great on the bottom. And I love the swirl effect. It's always nice to have something on the bottom. The sides turned out just right. Just the right amount of glaze, which is good to know with the glaze so close to the bottom edge of the butter dish. And the inside of the butter dish turned out really nice too. Beautiful colors. I love the blend of the honey flux, Arctic blue, and textured turquoise. And just the right thickness where the lid fits perfectly. Nice and snug. Just a great fit. And the butter is a perfect fit. Now if you have longer sticks of butter, you can just cut it in half. Now the handle of the lid, great fit. You want the handle to be a nice fit so it doesn't slip out of your hands. I've had handles slip out of my fingers before, so I always make them a little bigger because they do shrink in the kiln. And I absolutely love how the inside of the lid turned out. This Arctic blue is such a beautiful color, all on its own. No glaze on the rim of the lid, which is really important. Whoa. I just love how the glaze flowed down the lid. I did use just the right amount of glaze. The honey flux helped the glaze flow, and the extra Arctic blue on the top and the 2 coats of textured turquoise flowed just beautifully right to the edge also. I love it. And I love the color combination. Now you think, can I do this again? Can I duplicate it? I did it again. And it turned out just as great, which is good to know if you use the same glazing technique that I did. I love how the glaze flowed down. Just as nice. Goes to show you can make the same butter dish. Of course, just a touch different because that's the beauty of creating your own pottery. You'll still have your own unique look. You watching helps me to make more videos, like this one. Now head on over to my How to Make a Wavy Bowl video, or 5 cool ways to glaze a wavy bowl. If you do, I get to play with more clay. Let's stay dirty